Is Canadian real estate affordable to the average household? With prices in Vancouver already over $1 million, in Toronto soon to cross over $1 million, can the average household making the average household income afford to buy a house in their own city? On this episode of Bald Prairie Real Estate, we're going to answer that question. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Bald Prairie Real Estate, where I educate you about Canadian real estate. If you're new here, my name is Matthew Pfeiffer, and I'm a real estate agent from Regina, Saskatchewan. Now, housing affordability is of course an extremely important issue to just about everybody. And contrary to some of the comments I've gotten in the past, no, I just don't want prices to increase forever, and I don't tell my buyers to pay more so that I can make more money. I'd rather housing be as affordable as possible so as many people as possible can buy more houses. Because if we're talking entirely selfishly, the realtor selfish Matt, I'd like to have 2, 3, 4, 5 people buy houses because I make a lot more money doing that than one person buying one expensive house. Now, this is going to be a kind of series of videos I'm going to be working on about housing affordability in Canada. That's what this first topic is. I also want to talk about what does the average price get you in various different Canadian cities, as well as can an individual, just one income, afford to buy a house in Canada? That's just some of the videos I'm thinking along this thread. Let me know if there's something along that you would like me to cover in some of these upcoming videos. Now, when I was doing the research for this, some of the results actually surprised me because I had some assumptions of where I thought things would line up, and it didn't always turn out that way. So I think you're going to find these results rather interesting. But before we get into checking on Canadian affordability, let's talk about some terrible jokes, because I got a great one from the viewer for this one. What does the shark say when he eats a clownfish? That tastes kind of funny. If you've got a great joke, put it in the comments below. I love viewer jokes to use them in future episodes of Bald Prairie Real Estate. This video is going to be a little bit of an experiment, so let's set out the rules of this experiment. We're going to compare the average household income to the benchmark price in various different cities. We're going to look at whether the buyer can pass the stress test, because that has a much higher threshold than the actual monthly payments, and then whether or not they can actually make those payments month to month based on their income. I've got an affordability threshold that they can't be over. Talk about that in just 1 second. So what we've done here is I've taken the CMHC household average income data set that they provide. I've adjusted it to 2021 dollars. We're going to be using the composite benchmark price. The composite benchmark price combines all property types into one to give us one metric. That's a little bit easier to work with. If you want to learn more about the benchmark price, I've done a video on it. I'm also going to link a PDF below that explains all the calculations, all the formulas, everything you need to know about the benchmark price. This fictitious buyer that's going to be trying to buy a house in these various different cities, they already have the down payment saved up and all associated closing costs. And I understand 100%. That saving for that down payment is one of the biggest barriers to buying a house in Canada. We will talk about what the minimum down payments are, but for the sake of simplification, we're just going to take it out that they've already got that saved up. They're going to pay this off over 25 years. Their interest rate is 1.85. It's a 5-year fixed rate. That's a very common interest rate at the time of recording this video. The stress test rate, though, is 4.79%. So that's that much higher threshold that I talked about. That's going to make it a lot harder to buy a house. You'll see as you get through the video how important that really is. This buyer has no other debts, so lines of credit, credit cards, car payments, anything like that. I understand that's not entirely realistic, but I'm trying to remove as many variables as possible. What we're going to use for the affordability is a 40% of your monthly income. I know that a lot of people say you should only spend 30 or 33 or 35%. The reason I'm using 40 is because when you're qualifying for a mortgage, that is generally the threshold that you cannot exceed. So that's why I've used that. I am only going to be testing the mortgage payment and property taxes in that expenses. Generally, you're going to have to add condo fees if those are applicable, and a heat component. I'm pulling those out just to make this simpler. It also makes it a little bit rosier. Even still, you're going to see that that might not be enough to help everybody out when they're buying a house in these respective cities. So that's kind of the criteria that I'm using. Let's start off by looking at the Canadian benchmark price and the Canadian average household income, and then get into a bunch of different cities. Across Canada, the average before tax household income is $99,000. The benchmark price is about $620,000. So that makes your minimum down payment $38,000. Now that's because you have to have 5% on the first $500,000, 10% on the next $500,000, and if you have a purchase price over $1 million, you must have 20% down. That's gonna come into play later on in this video. The monthly mortgage payment on that would be about $2,500. And for property tax, I tried to do a rough average at $350 a month. Does this fit under this qualification affordability threshold I've set out? Well, your monthly income is about $8,200. So that means you can only spend about $3,300 per month. The stress test puts you at $3,800 per month, but the monthly mortgage payment combined with these taxes works out to about $2,900. So the stress test would disqualify the average household from buying a benchmark priced house in Canada, but the monthly mortgage payments would be about 35% of one's monthly income. So they would actually be able to afford those payments and the property taxes combined, but the stress test disqualifies them from actually purchasing that house. Now let's look at some individual cities in Canada, starting off with my hometown, Regina. In Regina, our average household before tax income is $105,000. Our benchmark price is $271,000. That means your 5% down payment is $13,500, and your monthly mortgage payment would be about $1,100. Property tax is about $225 a month. So does this fit in with this affordability threshold? Well, your monthly income is $8,700 a month, so you can spend about $3,500 per month on your mortgage payment and property taxes. The stress test rate would put you at $1,750, and your monthly payment and your property taxes together works out to about $1,350. So yes, the average household can afford to buy a house in Regina because they can pass the stress test, and the monthly payment fits well under this 40% threshold. In fact, it's only about 15% of one's monthly income. This doesn't surprise me at all. Regina has long been one of the most affordable major cities in Canada, and this continues to be true. But what about larger cities? Let's maybe check out Calgary now. Calgary is not only a much larger, more important economic city in Western Canada than smaller centers like Regina, it also has the highest average before tax household income in Canada. It's $127,000. Their benchmark price is $431,000. Means your minimum down payment is gonna be $21,000. Monthly mortgage payment works out to about $1,750 a month. Property taxes are gonna be about $200 a month. Does this fit within the affordable threshold that I've set out? With a $10,500 per month average household income, your maximum spend is gonna be about $4,200 a month. That stress test qualification payment is gonna be $2,750 a month, but your actual monthly payment is gonna be $1,950 a month. So yes, the average household making the average household income can not only afford to pass the stress test, they can easily afford that monthly payment. It's about 21% of the household monthly income. But Calgary's got that unique combination of an extremely high average household income and lower house prices. Let's look at some larger, more expensive cities. Montreal's been going through a little bit of a real estate boom recently, and that's been driving prices up. So does Montreal fit in this affordability threshold? Let's look at this. The average household before tax income in Montreal is about $90,000. Their benchmark price is about $450,000. So your minimum down payment is gonna be $22,500. That works out to about $1,800 a month. Property taxes are gonna be about $370 a month on a house like that. Does this fit under this affordability threshold? Well, you've got a monthly income of $7,500 a month. That means the maximum you can spend is about $3,000 per month. The stress test qualification is gonna work out to $2,900 a month, but the actual combined monthly payment is about $2,200 a month. So the average household in Montreal just barely slips under the threshold with the stress test rate, but they easily can afford those monthly payments. That works out to about 25% of the average household's monthly income. But prices, of course, have been continuing to increase. This is going to continue to change. Of course, only $100 more per month, and now you might not qualify under the stress test rate. How about looking at even bigger, more expensive cities? Let's look at Toronto next. Toronto is not only the largest and most influential real estate market in Canada, it's the most popular segment in my Bald Prairie Real Estate Canadian Real Estate Market Update. A few of you may have even skipped directly to this section if you're from Toronto, so do me a favor, hit hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you do that. Let's get into talk about affordability in Toronto. The average household income is $112,000 before tax. Their benchmark price is $969,000. That makes their minimum down payment $72,000 because you need to have 5% on the first $500,000 and 10% on the next $500,000. If you're over $1 million, you've got to have 20% down. So that down payment, $72,000, that's obviously a significant barrier to buying a house in Toronto. Your monthly mortgage payment's gonna be about $3,900. Property taxes, I averaged this out over the 10 largest cities in the GTA at about $600 a month at that purchase price. Does this fit under this affordability threshold I've set out? Well, a monthly income is gonna be $9,300 a month. So with that 40% maximum, it's $3,750 a month. When you qualify under the stress test, it's $5,900 a month. The combined monthly and property tax payment though is gonna work out to about $4,500 a month. So the average household in Toronto doesn't qualify because of the stress test, and their monthly payments also exceed that 40% threshold. And the affordability is gonna become even harder once we see benchmark prices in Toronto increase over $1 million, because now instead of a $70,000 or $80,000 down payment, now you're gonna need a $200,000 down payment. Let's check in now with Vancouver, Canada's most expensive market, and see how things work out. I saved Vancouver for last because it is Canada's most expensive real estate market. Let's see how these numbers work out. Average household before tax income is $105,000. Their benchmark price is $1,084,000. That makes their minimum down payment $217,000. That's because you have to have a 20% down payment when your purchase price is over $1 million. And this is of course a massive hurdle for anybody looking to buy a house in Vancouver. That down payment is double the average household before tax income. So there's a significant barrier. But your monthly mortgage payment is gonna be $3,600 a month. Property taxes, that's one of the few affordable things in Vancouver. It's about $350 a month at that purchase price. Does this fit under this affordability threshold? Well, your monthly income is $8,750 a month. It means you can spend about $3,500 per month on your house. The stress test qualification works out to $5,300 a month. Your monthly combined payment would be $3,950 a month. So the average household in Vancouver cannot pass the stress test, they also could not afford that monthly payment. That works out to about 45% of one's monthly income. And of course, that $200,000 down payment is a massive hurdle for somebody to overcome. Some of these results were exactly what I expected. Vancouver and Toronto, I knew were not going to fit under my affordability threshold, and I was pretty confident Regina was easily going to fit under my affordability threshold. Calgary and Montreal I wasn't so sure on, and I really like them because I think they are very good examples of a number of major cities in Canada, both in average household income and in benchmark price. And there's a couple of major takeaways I think we can learn from this. I think the first one is that you're probably going to need two incomes in a household in order to afford to buy the benchmark house in Canada. The second one is going to be those massive down payments in cities like Vancouver and in Toronto very soon. That is a huge hurdle for just about any buyer to have that amount as a down payment. And then I think the most interesting takeaway was when we looked at the Canadian numbers, because that $600,000 price point is a tipping point. The average household can afford the monthly payments, but they cannot pass the stress test, which would disqualify them from buying that house. So those are kind of the three big takeaways that I thought were really interesting. That benchmark price being over $600,000 in Canada. If you look at most major metro areas, there's only two that are over that $600,000 price point right now, Toronto and Vancouver. Most other centers in Canada are not above that $600,000 price point. So that's also something to think about when you see that number get thrown around in Canada. that there's only a few cities that actually have prices above that threshold for their benchmark price. Now, are you thinking about buying a house this year? And what did you think of my methodology for this? Let me know in the comments below what you thought of my results and how I came about them. And if you're thinking about buying a house this year and you would like to be connected with a fantastic real estate agent in your market, let me know. I'm going to put my contact information below so you can reach out to me, and I'd be happy to pair you up with a fantastic real estate agent in your area. Want to know what's going on in the Canadian housing market right now? Right here is my most recent Canadian housing market update. And right here is what the YouTube algorithm thinks you need to see next and learn more about from Bald Prairie Real Estate. As always, guys, thanks very much for watching.